host appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the carry on drag.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, guys? Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the latest edition of Views on the News. This is a show where we have opinionated people. And boy, have I got some opinionated people this time. We're starting with Guy Otten from Manchester. Hello, Guy.
Hello.
You're joining us from your home this time, not from a hotel in Brighton where you were last week.
Correct. That's right.
And we have Tersia from South Africa. Welcome, Tersia. Thank you for spending a few minutes with us instead of with the rugby.
Sacrifices must be made.
And David from New York.
Hello.
David, thank you for joining us. I know you've had a lot of family things lately. So
Yeah.
I always say family comes first. So I'm glad that you found an opportunity to be with us tonight.
Well, thank you. And it's such a pleasure to be here and to be amongst colleagues and friends in this international community, this peace community.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, here we are. We're multinational, aren't we? It's wonderful. So I'm a big fan of the BBC. Out of all the media, I think it is the least biased. And that's what I want. I want my news source to come untainted by the opinion of the news gatherers. But the reason I think it's least biased is because it's not a government mouthpiece. It doesn't have any commercial backers, so it doesn't have to do what Nestle want, for example. And this means it can have its own independent opinions about things, and it can it can report the news without any twist, without any spin. And we know there are some other news stations which do the very opposite. They always try and make sure that their view represents what they would like or what they think their audience would like to hear, whether it's right wing or left wing or what. So what puzzles me a little bit is that some people complain that the BBC isn't calling the Hamas fighters terrorists. And that's because, in my view, they would like it to be biased in the direction that they favor. Because words like terrorist and freedom fighter are political. They show an affection for a side. And I don't want my news delivery system to be that. What do you think?
Well, I mean, yes, I agree with everything that you're saying, that news should be pure. And there are other, as you say, the BBC, there's AP News, United Press International, that are not like the CNNs or the Fox Newses that are doing this. There's an interesting quote from someone who actually is on the left, who's always very interesting. Howard Zinn, who says you can't be neutral on a moving train, meaning that, where we all have skin in the game on this planet. And while we don't want to have the news, I think, just brought to us creating some type of information circle that doesn't break into anything else, I think we do have to look at what's happening in Israel and Palestine as the tragedy that it is. It's a complete failure of not only what we're giving to our children and the children of Israelis and Palestinians for the next several generations,
Yeah.
Of this eye for an eye, fighting over land, fighting over territory, putting a pin in and saying, this is why these people are bad, and saying it's 1948 or it's 1911 or it's 1974, and making all of those judgments, when the meta issue is that we are humans are killing other humans for such horrific religious reasons. I mean, and I don't want to be crass, but when I think of the Holy Land, I don't think of it as HOLY. I think of all the holes that we've put in each other.
Yeah.
And when I think of the Holy Land, I don't think of it as a religious holy site, which there are, and people are allowed to be religious. But I think about all the damage we've done to each other.
Yeah.
And that to me is the real shame here, the infamia, that we allow multiple generations of this to go on, and to not see each other as human, but to see each other as less than equal. And I'll stop now.
I would like to pick up on what David said about the Holy Land.
Mm-hmm.
So this issue, since it's happened, has occupied much space in my head, and I've been thinking and reading and watching. As far as I try to independent news and people that I regard as objective as people can be, and that includes people like Yuval Noah Harari. It includes scholars of history. I've watched a number of documentaries that were made before this whole thing blew up a week ago, which has given me insight in ways that has led me to the conclusion that there is, regrettably, for the moderate religious people who continue to say that religion is important and religion is a force for good, and there's only a few extremists and fundamentalists and they're in the minority, and that might be true. But the fact is, without religion and religious belief, whether moderate or extreme, there would be no such thing as a holy site.
Right.
And without a holy site, as in there would be much less to fight over. And that makes this whole situation in Palestine so preposterous, because it's not as, I can understand people fighting over a water source or land that has some value in terms of what it can do for people. But the Holy Land, it's just an idea. And when I was still a Christian, I was taught that the word holy means put aside for God. So a holy person is special, put aside, and a holy land is the same. Now, without that concept, suddenly fighting over the Temple Mount or the Al-Aqsa Mosque or a particular region just becomes obsolete. And then that goes both ways, because the reason that the Zionists believe that that's the part of the world where they had to return to is because their book says it. And that's one of the root causes. There are many root causes, and it is complex and it is complicated. I acknowledge that. But the only factor that I have been able this far to determine that can be pointed out as the root cause that cuts across everything is religious belief. There is nothing else. Even in terms of what happened in the First World War, when the British Empire promised the land to both Palestine and the Zionists, and even if one takes that into account, there was a reason why the British Empire felt that the Zionists had some sort of a claim. It was because they were God's chosen people, and the Zionists had influence. So I just want to drop this bomb, and that is my belief that even moderate religion is not good, because moderate religious people enable, by being moderate, by the very fact, even even passively, they enable the fundamentalists and the extremists to exist as a minority.
I'm nodding my head off here.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Guy, do you want to come in on this? Oh, I think Guy might have frozen. So I'm wholeheartedly in agreement with both of the speakers so far. And this is the reason that I raised this, how the media responds to these issues. It's because of the events that have been going on in Israel. And it's completely changed my attitude, because before last Saturday, I would have had, I suppose, tentative, because I'm fairly ignorant about the background here, sympathies towards Palestine, because the disparity of power was so self-evident. You know, we have Israel as an entirely militarized and competent nation, and Palestinians seem to be like the victims here, especially as you know, they're trapped in their parts of the land that Israel seems to allow them to have. But Palestine isn't Hamas.
Right.
And what happened last Saturday was completely atrocious. And my sympathies have swung. I can't condone the invasion of Israel, the atrocities that were committed in the name of, I guess, Islam. And, do you know, I asked one of my daughters whether, if she lived in a castle and the water was supplied from beyond the walls of the castle, and the food came in to the castle, and the fuel came in to the castle, would she attack the people outside the castle? And she said, "What do you think I am? Crazy?"
Mm-hmm.
So what was the motive? What was the motive? Hamas obviously went out there and struck Israel in some sort of vengeance mode, trying to stir up trouble. They poked the hornet's nest. Am I wrong?
I mean, there's no doubt that there's no doubt that the religious element exacerbates what might anyway be a tribal territorial conflict.
Right.
Yes.
And there's no doubt about that. But I mean, and I think that what's interesting is that both sides have a lot of right and justification to advance in their favor. And it's so frustrating that peace efforts have not borne fruit, because it's really important that we do find a just peace. And every year that goes by with more settlements, you know, expanding on the West Bank and so forth, seems to make peace less and less possible.
Yeah.
And it's really one of the world's most tragic situations that's been, I can't see a way out, to be honest.
Yeah.
That's what worries me, is that I can't see a way out either. And I don't want to overplay, maybe I am overplaying the role of religion, that's my bias. But as long as there's until that moment where people stop saying only Allah can help us, or God is with us, I can't see rational thought coming into play. And I was watching one of the news reports, and it was a Palestinian woman crying about a destroyed building and family members dead. And what struck me about the terrible situation, despite what was happening, she was saying only Allah can save us. And as long as people have, on both sides, have that mode of thinking, there will not be a solution, because even moderate people who are suffering still think that God can save them or Allah can save them. And as long as people don't realize only we can save ourselves by being rational actors,
Right.
I think that's right. Yeah,
That's
can
right.
we find a solution?
Right.
Absolutely. All the while that they have their idea of a God who favors them we're stuck in this loop
Yeah.
of reciprocal vengeance.
Mm-hmm.
There's no evidence
Yeah.
for any God.
Right.
It's such a waste of life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's the
And
tragedy.
I just want to drive this point home, because I think, to me, that was the most important point. As long as people think, either as victims or as perpetrators or as a little bit of both, as long as we think that God will save us, we disempower ourselves and we become just reasonless beings. The moment you start realizing there's no God that's going to save us, whether it's Allah or Yahweh, we have to make a plan, and we have to act like rational people and make the right choices, even and think about the consequences.
Don't you know?
That's the point that I would like to drive home.
Yeah, I know, Tersia, I couldn't agree with you more. You know, this whole area has been a tinderbox, not just in our lifetime, but for multiple people's lifetimes, right? I mean, you're talking about Bedouin people, both the Hebrews and the Arabs, who occupied this space.
You're obviously very young, David.
Not as young as I'd like to be. And you've got, you know, you've got a small little space which is literally home to three of the major Abrahamic traditions. And by golly, they are all apocalyptic. And they will be very happy to send each other home to their God, and every one of us to our beyond in the name of their faith. I've worked for the UN, and I know that there are religious states that put pressure, political pressure, on the United Nations, which, by the way, I'd hate to see a world without the United Nations, but I've seen how the sausage gets made. And I can tell you that there are countries in the Middle East, Arab countries, Muslim countries, and Israel, that have put tremendous political pressure on what we call peacekeeping, even, and pick a side with the idea that, oh no, you can't hold us to account for religious reasons. They'd like to sway this over. This is about land, or this is about some other resource. This is about God.
I just
what
want
worries
to
me?
add.
Sorry, Tersia. Do you want to go ahead?
Yes, I would like to say that this is indeed a global issue. I didn't know, for example, that there are more than 20,000 South Africans who live in the Holy Land, and the only reason most of them choose to live there is because they want to evangelize Jews to become Messianic Jews. In fact, one of my students has a grandmother who lives in Jerusalem, and there's apparently also a couple of thousand Americans who live in the West Bank, who are settlers in the West Bank. I don't know if you guys knew that. And the reason that people from Christians or Jews, because the Messianic Jewish movement is very strong. It's very strong in South Africa. It's grown exponentially, is because of faith. And those people all support the claims, and they contribute to settlements in the West Bank, and they contribute to the bonfire.
Well, we reported
fuel to the fire.
We reported on this. We reported on, I think it was beyond a Messianic Jew, a Christian who had gone back to Israel, and his wife and two daughters were shot because they strayed too close to some holy site in Tel Aviv. But you're right, this has become global, and that's what worries me, because there were protests, marches, and quite offensive ones, calling out, death to the Jews by Palestinians in London, New York, Chicago, Berlin, Manchester. We've got these people here now. They're not restricted to their homeland,
right?
And they're poisoning.
And they have their allies too, on both the left and the right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're poisoning our wells because it seems to me, and I may be going a bit too controversial here, but it seems to me that in Western societies, we have achieved a level of civilization which is desirable. And, it's got the culture is to be law abiding, is to be less fundamental towards religion, is to be caring towards our population, the young and the old, and to educate people as much as possible.
Sounds like humanism to me.
Exactly.
Right.
To be equal in our treatment of the sexes and the different races and so on. And they've come here because we have that society, because it's a good one. And then they've brought their religion with them and they're trying to ruin it. Am I being a bit right wing here?
I don't know. I mean, people have a right to speak their mind, and part of what makes democracy work is the fact that people are free to express themselves. We have equally free to have different ideas and to challenge those beliefs. So I don't fault people for politically gathering, even if I don't agree with them. But I also take your concern that sometimes democracies eat themselves. Right.
Yes.
I mean, you can look in the United States and see what happened in 2016 to now with the MAGA movement. And you can go back to 1933 in Germany, So, I mean, that's the problem. In essence, you can lose what you cherish, which is this healthy secular viewpoint that is humanistic or loving or whatever you want to call it, if people who are less so take control.
I just want to say something here that was also foremost in my mind even before we started the show. You've just said, John, that they want to come and ruin it, and that makes me think again, and I want to drive this point home again. The only solution to a better world is more people who think rationally. And one of the things we are able to do when we think rationally is to take one step back. And from the point of view of, as John, what you said is they want to come and ruin it. And yes, that is from the point of view of people like you and me, that is true. But I still maintain that in order to facilitate any form of rational conversation, we need to begin by stepping back and saying, yes, from our point of view, they want to ruin it. But from their point of view, that is what they have to do, because in doing that, they're making it better because of what they believe. And that is what we need to communicate, is that we need to get people to take one step back and realize, we always have to realize that the one group's terrorist is the other group's freedom fighter.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the only way we can sit around a table and have rational discussions is if we put false beliefs aside, and we have to have a conversation.
As I made that little speech, I realized that even the use of the word they is emotive. But as you know, I've got a mixed race family. So I'm not against immigrants or different people. What I'm against is them bringing their culture here, which is, doesn't fit with ours. Because the reason that we're an attractive destination. It's because of our culture. And if they're going to change us into where they came from, they might just as well have stayed there.
Well, typically what happens is by the third generation, most immigrants have joined the greater population. They've left behind even what they seem as their ancestral homeland. They may not even know anybody there. So it's all baby steps. But if you look at immigration patterns and migration patterns, by third generation, those people are British. Those people are American, and then they're looking at the next immigrant group coming in and saying, why can't you be more like us Americans?
Yes, that's right. Well, what worries me, and I'm going back again to what you suggested there, that it's a generational thing. What worries me is what's going on in the indoctrination of children in some of these countries where there's anti-equality behavior, laws even going on. And take a look at this. This is an Iranian girl. She looks about 5, and she's on TV. And the story is that she's there with her parents. And the story is that she's written a letter to a saint. And it, like, a child would write a letter to Santa Claus. And the interview is asking her what she wished for. Take a look.
So she was praying basically to Hussein, asking Hussein to make her father's dream come true. What is her father's dream? So her father's dream is to become a martyr. So she basically is praying to Hussein for her father to die. So this is her wish.
Oh boy,
that's her prayer.
Wow.
Is that good parenting?
It's no. I mean, it's not good parenting in our sort of frame of reference. Obviously, it is in theirs, which is bizarre. I mean, this is one of the problems going back to Hamas and the Jewish or the Israelis, should I say, is that it appears.
Oh,
guy is frozen.
Yeah, and he was about to make a really good point.
Yes. Well, that's unfortunate, isn't it? So while he's frozen, I'll move on, because on the theme of this weird, what we see as weird culture is spilling out elsewhere. In France, a teacher was killed and 2 people were seriously injured in a knife attack at a school. And the attacker was shouting out Allahu Akbar, and the person he killed was a French language teacher. And the attacker is in his 20s. He's been arrested. He was known for his involvement with radical Islam, and he's now the subject of an investigation following the attack for murder in connection with a terrorist enterprise. So there you go. They've got it in France too. What do you think of that?
Well, you've got Charlie Hebdo. You've got in the United States Salman Rushdie being attacked and blinded in one eye for writing a book. The ludicrous idea that somehow killing is the answer. It's all through a holy book, right?
Yeah.
The justification for killing your neighbor is as equal to, in some cases, the justification in people's book to love thy neighbor. And that's the problem, is that there's that you can look to either one. You can cherry pick in any holy book how you're supposed to be in life. And so Yeah, when Hamas calls for a day of jihad, which is why there were these attacks around the world, it is because the idea of spreading this cancer,
Yes,
not only attacking Israelis, right, but anybody who is considered the infidel.
yes, or even
I-
even not Christian. I mean, Jesus came with a sword. Remember,
Right.
Mm.
Right.
Guy, I want to ask you something, and it's a pity that our new former Islamist contributor or former Muslim contributor is not here tonight. I haven't met him yet, but Guy, I think I think you're the appropriate person to ask, is because you've had lots of contact
Yes.
with Muslims and former Muslims, and there was something about the phrase fundamentalist Islam that you said, John, and at the risk of sounding Islamophobic, I wonder whether it's a true statement that Islam lends itself more to violent fundamentalism than Christianity or Judaism. That's something that I've been wondering about lately. On a scale, any religion can be fundamentalist. I mean, even the Buddhists can be violent and fundamentalist.
Right.
But I'm increasingly, in the world that I live in, getting the feeling that for every 10 Muslims, 5 or 6 are extreme fundamentalists, whereas for every 10 Christians or Jews, maybe 2 or 3 are fundamentalists. And maybe you've had more experience. I don't know.
That's a good point. I think it depends when in history you catch them. I mean,
yes, I think there is something in that. I mean, there's a lot in all 3 religions that drive towards violence and aggression to non-adherence.
Yes.
But right now in Islam, it's very strong. But I mean, what's interesting in the UK is that lots of Muslims are trying quite hard to show themselves as peaceful and normal and loving and very socially adjusted, because they realize that, you know, we just don't tolerate it if they go into the more extremist line. But I mean, you only have to read the Quran and you'll come across within the first 3 surahs some really
Oh dear.
I think he's stuck again, isn't he? So I wish he was right.
Oh, he's unstuck. He's unstuck.
But not a lot.
Guy, just don't get stuck within the first 3 surahs of the Quran. That can be really tough.
I mean, I have ordered a new laptop because this laptop is not functioning well, and I think it's just a bit old.
Is it, you have to crank it?
It's 10 years old. It's not that old.
Powered, I expect. Yeah.
Steam powered.
I wish you were right, Guy, but unfortunately, look at what we've got going on in the UK right now. Research published by the National Secular Society. No, sorry, published by the London School of Economics.
It's right. Actually, substantial numbers of Muslims.
Well, I'm
sorry, I was saying that I agree that a substantial number of Muslims sympathize with extreme ideas. And the reality is that there is a sort of concentric circle of Islam. You've got your violent jihadists, and then there's another group that sympathize with them.
Yeah. And here he's frozen again. So the item of news I was going to talk about was the research published by the London School of Economics and Political Science, which tells us that faith-based primary schools admit fewer children with special educational needs and disabilities than non-faith-based schools, because we have some, what are they called, community ethics schools, which don't have an affiliation to any religion. And apparently they are kinder to the special educational needs cohort of the population than the faith-based schools. And it seems that faith-based schools, which have exemptions, believe it or not, from equality law to allow them to prioritize children based on the religiosity of their family in their admissions criteria. And that's how they can say, no, we don't want you. You've got problems. We'll just take these richer people with, you know, more suitable parents, suitable in their terms, you know, religious, in other words. And this is a practice which still exists in this country. And of course, it's widely criticized by children's rights advocates, including the National Secular Society and the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child. Why are we still in that sort of a dark age?
Yeah, and that's right. I mean, it's unacceptable. They've been found to discriminate against non-religious parents. They're now found to discriminate against special educational needs. They're not playing their full weight, and really, we need to abolish them. But we need to abolish them not because they're not playing their full sort of part, but because they are religious, and we don't want religious. We don't want children infected by religion. We want them to learn about religions, yes, or learn about philosophies generally, but not to be brought up in an atmosphere which is kind of expects them to believe in something like that. You know,
especially
really particularly, they got to be equipped to make their own decisions. Really,
yes, especially when we're footing the bill for this.
Right. I am shocked that you're finding hypocrisy in religion. I can't believe it.
Well, it's not hypocrisy. I mean, we do know that God is very adamant about having only perfect people allowed in his temple. I mean,
right.
So there's nothing hypocritical about it. It's just that God loves perfection. I mean, that's why I'm no longer religious. I'm not perfect enough.
David, you won't like this. You won't like this next news item, then, David. It's about hypocrisy. Because, believe it or not, there's a school. It's called the Uplands Primary School. It's in Sandhurst, which is a town where the college that we use to educate our military leaders it exists. And this particular primary school, it's trying to join the Keys Academy Trust. And that organization sent out a letter to parents saying that all schools that join the Keys retain their original status, because the parents were a bit concerned that this trust will instill some unwanted religious bias to their children. Most of our parents are non-religious, but the religious leaders want to get at our children. So they're doing it by forming trusts, which have an opportunity to control our schools to a certain extent. They get our money, but because they've thrown in a little bit themselves, they can have some influence over the curriculum. So this particular trust, the Keys Academy Trust, sent out this letter reassuring parents that none of the schools in the Keys Trust are faith schools. And it's completely untrue, because when you examine the schools that are in that trust, there's 10 of them, and every one of them is registered with the Department of Education as having a designated religious character of Church of England.
Yeah, but that's not religious. I mean, that's just bland old vanilla. I mean, there's no religion in the Church of England. I mean, you guys, the Church of England just goes through the motions. They are not religious. I mean, not in my book.
Well, the trouble is that the Church of England has recognised that they're a bit lukewarm, that they're losing their congregations. And do you know what they've done? They've targeted our schools in an attempt to bolster their dwindling support.
Well, and
This is one of the ways they're doing it.
indoctrination, when indoctrination isn't at home, where the religious will attack is in the schools, especially the public schools.
Yeah.
You have this in the United States with things called the good news clubs, where after school programs that are religious, you have community boards that are trying to censor books in not only the school libraries, but the public libraries. This idea that somehow we have to Christianize or, in some way keep books out of the hands of people or keep them away from ideas and all this other stuff is all religious, and it's all about indoctrination. And if it's one thing that these people understand is that get them while they're young, because by the time they reach 8, 9 years old, they've made their decisions pretty much broadly in their life. And so you've got to get them as early as possible. You want to convince them to believe the same dogma and theology. Yeah.
Well, this is, as I said, the Church of England has recognized that it needs to do something before it completely dies out.
Right.
And it's called the Church of England Evangelism Project. and in a school in Surrey, the Diocese of Guildford invited the school to take part in its Youth Catalyst project. And this particular school doesn't have a religious character, but the project would entail youth ministers coming to the school to hold religious activities, termly worship events, and providing a bridge into the local church where effective small groups will be running to develop the faith of young people. They've got a promotional video about this. Luckily, that particular school, the Jubilee High School in Addlestone, congratulations, they said, we shall be declining this project.
Well, the only good news is that if you look at the rise of the nuns, those people who are millennials and younger than that, the increase in people, certainly in the United States and certainly around the world, who affiliate with no religious belief or have no religious belief is growing. So even with all these vestigial theologies and philosophies still trying to earn their market share, the reality is more and more people are turning away from them. So that's the good news for all this insanity.
I need to not temper the good news, I hope. We must just be careful of not using the good news to become complacent.
Oh, yeah.
Because
very good.
I'm often worried that the nuns are, to quote a very tripe old, if you stand for nothing, you fall for everything. So I would like to, I love that the nuns are growing, but I think we need to consciously and constantly remind those nuns and the growing number of them, especially the young amongst them, to never become complacent and to remain active in communities that grow community amongst people who stand for reason and humanity. And I think that is something that the nuns have to take from the book of religions and religious people. Absolutely. We need to do something to grow the community. And with community, I mean the sense of community, because people need that. And we need to foster healthy communities. And I feel quite strongly about that.
Yeah, which is what I've been trying to do, of course, with our events that we've been staging here in the UK. And David, you might like to know that I'm planning another one.
Ah, bravo.
It's called Hitchmas.
Very nice.
Because it's a tribute.
John, you have to say Hitchmas. Because if you say Hitchmas, then you've got idiots like me hearing Hitchmas, M-A-S-S, and then I get completely nervous. So please make sure that you pronounce it Hitchmas.
Okay, Hitchmas it is and shall be forever now. The thing is, it's a tribute to the late Christopher Hitchins, and it's staged on the anniversary of the 12th anniversary of his death on December the 15th. So cross your fingers that I can manage to bring this one off. Anyway,
yeah, I'm waiting to hear. I might even come down to Brighton now that I know Brighton. And
yeah, it's worth a visit. Sure. Yeah. So I do have an item of good news for you. I don't know whether you are aware of a woman, a human rights activist, an Iranian woman called Narges Mohammadi. And she's been serving a 10-year jail term in Iran's notorious Evin prison in the capital, Tehran. But she's been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah, well done. Yeah.
The US President Joe Biden called on the Iranian government to free her from prison and praised her unshakable courage. And the French President Emmanuel Macron said she was a freedom fighter. So it's okay. If you're a politician, it's okay to come out on a side. But if you're a news reporter like the BBC, it isn't.
Right.
Finally, take a look at this and give me your reaction.
Oh, no! Oh, no! Oh, no! Oh, no! Oh, no!
The power of religion.
Okay, John, I want to ask you. It's always been my dream. Some of you might know that I've gone undercover with a traditional African healer. There's a number of churches within walking distance from where I live. And it's my dream to take my video camera and go into those churches and make a recording, because you know what, that is what happens around my neighborhood, like in every Saturday, Friday, Sunday, even midweek. I can make a whole compilation. And I was just I actually what I was dreaming of is doing this segment where we have maybe a new show on Free Thought Hour where I go and visit these churches and have 5-second conversations. And
or just go in there with a secret camera. Do some recording.
I don't even have to take a secret camera. I'll just go in. And what I would like to do is test the reaction. So if I go in and I pretend, I'll just put plugs in my ears because I can't stand loud noise. And then when people welcome me, I'll say, "Hello, I'm your local friendly atheist, and I've come to see what you guys are doing." To see what the reaction is.
Yeah, that might be a bit dangerous.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
No, they would probably, pray over you and love bomb you and things like that.
They
might try to exorcise demons from you.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can beat their demons. I'll just go, no.
Good luck with that. You've got my full backing. Anyway, guys, thank you very much. It's time for the end.
Cheers.
Say goodbye.
Thank you.
Was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the Carrie Moon drag.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, guys?